Alright, so the scope of this video is going to be ACEs, specifically the Athearn Genesis ACE, the SD70ace. So with this video I'm going to talk about some of the different versions that I've done of this engine and some of the different modifications that you can do. This is all three of them that I have. Each one has different things in them, different sound, different motors in certain cases. Some of them have LEDs, some of them don't. So we're going to take a look at the differences with and without, and differences in the sounds with those as well. So the first one that I picked up was NS1030 here, the anniversary unit. This is actually my second one. The first one kind of was lost due to the LED conversion, which did not go well. It was my first attempt at doing an Athearn with LEDs. Kind of ruined the engine, so that project kind of stopped. So what it has now is it has lock sound in it, and it also has LEDs in it, and it also has the factory motor, which in this one is a little bit noisy. On the Virginian here, this one is from the most recent run. I picked this one up in the fall. It was from the first run that had the PTC roofs with it. This one had a very noisy motor out of the box, so I actually got rid of that, and it now has a Kato motor. And we're going to take a look at how that's done as well, and how it compares to the Athearn motor and how it sounds. This one also still has the factory bulbs in it, and it also has TCS WOW. We'll go over some of the strengths and weaknesses of WOW also. And this one I actually just picked up last week. This one was one I've been looking for quite some time. I originally wanted to get the DCC ready version, but they didn't have it. So the good folks at MB Klein or Model Train Stuff, they actually found one of these with the new PTC roof. It was a Tsunami version, so I figured I'd give it a try. At worst, if I didn't like the decoder, I would just rip it out and put a different one in. But as it turns out, I'm actually very impressed with it, and I think it's probably my favorite of the three. It definitely runs the best too. So this one also still has its factory motor in, but it actually runs much quieter than what the other two are. Not sure exactly why. I guess maybe certain runs of these run better than others. Some of them maybe just had bad motors. But this one also does have an LED conversion on it, so it's running the soundtracks. I did change out the speaker. It came with these all use 28mm speakers. That's also another difference in these as well. Being that I'm using lock sound in this one, I can use a 4-ohm speaker. So they're all using 28mm round speakers. This one's using an ESU speaker at 4 ohms. This one's using a kind of my go-to speaker on 28mm for 8 ohm applications, which is the TCS WOW. And then also in the new one here, that came with a Soundtrax 28mm. I actually got rid of that, ripped that out of there, and then put in a TCS speaker in there because it's 8 ohm. Tsunami decoders can't run a 4 ohm speaker. And did a couple other little tricks with the sound, which I'll show you as well. And actually it sounds pretty nice. So we'll take a look at the differences between the three and some of the different modifications that you can do to these. So this is going to be a pretty lengthy video. We're going to talk about motors, we're going to talk about sounds, we're going to talk about lighting, CVs to change. So if you're looking to improve the performance of your ACE, this is the video for you. So we'll start breaking it down here in just a moment. First up, we're going to have the ESU-equipped NS1030 here, and we're going to listen to the motor first. So we're going to go speed step 1. Oh, let's go forwards. So as you can see, the slow speed control is fantastic. And we'll listen to the motor here as we throttle up. And here we're only at speed step 30, but you can hear it. Sounds kind of flywheel and grindy noise there. Still not even half throttle. And we'll wait for it to come around here and you can hear it. Pretty noisy for half throttle. As we speed up, very loud at 3/4 throttle. So we'll back it up here for a second. And we'll listen into the sound next. So that's probably the weakest aspect of this engine is the horn. That horn is pretty bad. That's something that I would expect from soundtracks, not really from lock sound. So it's probably the thing about this engine that I hate the most is that horn. The prime mover itself is pretty good. So as you can see, the lighting on this one is pretty fantastic. Doesn't really have any bleed through from anywhere. So the lighting's good. That's about as good as it can get. Things from this engine here. This one is definitely going to be the loudest of the three, and that's to pretty much be expected because it does have the only one that has the 4-ohm speaker. So generally it's going to get a little bit more power to the speaker than the other two. The LED lighting, like I said, that's about as good as it's going to get. The motor, it's pretty noisy, and I think this is definitely one that is going to get the swap over to Kato. So that's going to happen. As far as the decoder itself, I mean, I like the way that it runs, but I'm very unhappy with that horn. So this is probably something that long-term I'm going to change either to Tsunami 1 or Tsunami 2. Or the other option is if ESU updates their files, which there should be a full throttle version of this particular file coming soon, or at least that's what we've been told for quite some time. If there is, I'm very, very much hoping that they include a better horn. If they do, then I'd be pretty tempted to put lock sound in all of my future Aces. But for now, Soundtracks is kind of my #1 choice. So that's the strengths and weaknesses of this engine, and then we'll move on to some of the others here next. So next up here we have the Virginian, which is going to have the factory bulb lighting, Kato motor, and it also has the TCS wow. So with this one, and it doesn't really look nearly as good in person as what it does here on the camera. The bulbs are pretty bad. They're not very bright. So on camera it looks a little bit brighter, but not nearly as good in person. So moving on, we'll do the motor functions here first. So we'll go to speed step 1. And it's pretty much the same as what the lock sound was. Now where this one's really going to shine is going to be on the noise. So we're bumping up the speed. Super quiet. Silence. We're at speed step 25 already, and you cannot hear this thing at all. Speed step 30. This is where the NS1030 was screaming and carrying on. So we're at speed step 50 now, and there's just a hint of motor noise. It's very slight. Still super quiet. And we'll bump it up here. So we got a speed step 85 here. Full blast. That is full blast right there, and that is about the same level of noise as what NS1030 was at speed step 30. So excellent control there. We'll back up a second here. So next we'll take a look at the sound. Now one of the problems with this engine is that the sound at idle and up to about a third to about half throttle, the sound is almost unrecognizable. You can't really hear it. It's really faint. It's really low. It's definitely not uniform throughout like most other decoders are. Once it starts to go, it does really kick up the volume, but I kind of wish that it would sound uniform throughout. So we'll unmute it here. And that's on. That's all the louder the idle gets. We've adjusted CVs. It's as loud as it's going to go. One of the bright points about it is the horn itself. This probably has the nicest horn out of any of the decoders. TCS sounds are always dead on. Grade crossing horn. One other thing of note is also whenever you hit number 4 and you get the grade crossing horn, it also doesn't flash the ditch lights like it should. The only one that does is F2. So this one definitely has the nicest horn of the three. It has the nicest motor of the three. However, the sounds aren't uniform throughout, which I mentioned that's kind of annoying. Also, it still has the factory bulbs, which those are going to go eventually, and it's going to get LEDs, and those are going to look a whole lot better. This would probably be the engine that I work on next, because I'm not going to keep TCS WOW on this long term. I'm kind of unhappy with how it works. I think it may be a little bit better suited in one of my other engines. But really the piece of this that's definitely going to shine is going to be that Kato motor. So NS1030 is definitely going to be getting that Kato motor. And probably this one, well, the decoder choice is kind of still up in the air. So it's either going to be Tsunami. Definitely not going to go and put lock sound in this one, just a matter of whether it's going to be Tsunami 1 or 2. Okay, so next up is the UP 1982, or the Mopoc Heritage, for the Missouri Pacific. This is probably my favorite running engine of the three, just because I feel like it has the best combination of everything in it right now. First off, we'll take a look at the motor control. So, speed step 1. Pretty much the same, not a real difference there. And we'll take a look at the overall noise. So noise-wise, this one kind of falls in between NS1030 and the Virginian, which has the Kato motor. Definitely quieter than the Norfolk Southern engine, but not quite as quiet as what the Kato is. So at half throttle here, it does become a little bit noisy. It's not overpowering. Not bad. So I don't really feel like that's bad enough that it's going to make me want to swap to a Kato motor. If it was a little bit more noisy, then I'd be more tempted to make that choice. But this is good enough. It's not loud enough that it blocks out the sound at the higher speeds, which is kind of the point in which I draw the line. And if it is too loud, then I swap it out. So this isn't too bad. So let's hit the lights here. And this has LEDs, and these things are bright. The camera doesn't really do it justice. If you look at these, it's like looking at the surface of the sun. It will literally leave a green spot in your vision. It is super, super bright. There's not really a CV to turn these down, so kind of as bright as it is now, that's kind of what you have to deal with. So let's hit the sounds here. Pretty good volume. One thing that I've always enjoyed about soundtracks is you can have it automatically signal the forward and stop motions and also reverse with the horns through a CV. Can't do that on lock sound, and I don't believe you can on TCS either. The volume isn't quite as loud as the lock sound, but it's also not distorted at all. It's a very nice, clear volume. So the horn may be not as loud as the other two, but I feel like it's a lot clearer. I do prefer the TCS horn a little bit better, but this is definitely my second favorite. So motor-wise, I don't really see any reason to make any changes here. That isn't loud enough for me to really be bothered by it. For the LEDs, they're perfect. I can't really complain there. The only real issue that I have right now, and this is temporary, is that there's a little bit of bleed through here on the backs of the lights. It's kind of hard to tell, but the ditch light housings do have some light seeping through on there, as well as also at the top of the roof there. Hard for you to see it, but it is there. So I just need to find some touch-up paint that happens to match this lighter blue color here, and then I think that'll be good. And the decoder I'm very, very happy with. For most of my purchases, I go with Locksound, and there was definitely a time in which I didn't have any Soundtrax engines, and usually Athearn and Soundtrax is kind of like the kiss of death. It's typically the combination I tend to bash the most. Athearn and Soundtrax are typically two of my least favorite companies, but this engine, it's probably the first Athearn locomotive and purchase that I've actually been satisfied and happy with, because it works like it's supposed to. Yes, it doesn't have LEDs just yet, and part of the reason that I went to the LED conversion so quickly on this one is one of the ditch lights was actually burned out, so it wasn't working. So I figured I would just tear into it right now and just correct it, because I was going to do LEDs at some point anyway, so it ended up happening right now. So after the touch-up paint, I think this engine's going to be pretty complete, and it's kind of the model of what I would like all of my other engines to be. With the other engines, those are definitely both going to get Kato motors, along with possibly this decoder or a Tsunami 2. I think that's going to be a really, really good combination.